Hello, my name is Robbie Fitzwater. I own, run, and operate Marketing Rhythm. We basically help e-commerce businesses grow through email marketing or intention marketing. So one of the common questions we get all the time is, how do email automations actually generate revenue? Like, how do they make money? So wanted to walk through that and kind of like walk everybody through some reasons for it, how it works, and kind of how to think about it through a little bit different lens. But basically, at a fundamental level, email automations or flows, as they're called in like Klaviyo. Basically, it's a email that's sent based on a triggered behavior. So basically, I do this, I get this email. You do this, you get this email. And basically, we can use these to strategically place different emails or different notifications and different messaging in different stages of that customer journey to ideally nudge them in the direction we'd like them to go in. So we really get to kind of hopefully create the behavior we really want to see, and ideally the behavior that's going to lead to a profitable customer, a happy customer, and just basically improving and optimizing the experience they're going to have, so they have a good experience, they want to come back, and they want to celebrate it a lot more. But basically, when we can understand how to orchestrate that customer journey in the way that's going to be beneficial for them, we can really hope to like build something that's going to be valuable for us as a business, because we again can ideally drive the behaviors we want to see. So like in a welcome series, we're ideally nurturing them and getting them to make that first purchase. We may be answering questions in a browse abandonment sequence. We may be onboarding smoothly in a post-purchase sequence and making sure they can really use the product and leverage it, and they're going to find value in it and want to come back and purchase again. So all of these things we're trying to do with each different behavior we want to see, but it really gives us a way of improving the process, because we're not doing it manually. We're automating it based on what they do, so we can really kind of streamline it to fit them directly. And basically, the big goal of this is creating a really nice contextual user experience that really gives them exactly what they need at different stages and helps them to ideally, again, make that first purchase and then come back, use the product, enjoy it, and find value in it. So they're going to be coming back on a consistent basis. And because this is based on behavior and based on what somebody's doing, it really scales up directly with your business. So basically, if you have a certain level of traffic when you're building this, and that traffic increases 2 times or 3 times or 4 times, basically every one of those stages up, because this is based on behavior, this is going to scale up with your business, which is really nice because it kind of moves dynamically with it. And as you see more and more of those given behaviors, you know that again you're doing work that's hopefully improving on those. So when we're building these, we're thinking typically, hey, let's build these with as highly contextual information as possible. So like segmented is really powerful. Segmentation is really powerful here. So if we know somebody in a specific segment or a specific buying category purchases something, what are they going to need at different stages? So like if I buy a pair of running shoes, hey, after 6 months, I want to know, that's when somebody typically needs a new pair of running shoes. So how can you kind of educate and inform them along the way, saying like, hey, 3 months in, let's get, like, this may be time for a new pair of running shoes. Or do you know you need a new pair of running shoes every 6 months or so? 5 months in, it's saying like, hey, you've had these for about 5 months. If you've been using them, it may be getting time soon, and really trying to like nudge them in the direction they need to go, but ideally educating and informing them during that process. So again, they're finding as much value out of your brand and your insights and expertise as possible. So again, everybody wins. You can also use these to, again, kind of proactively address issues. Some of these may not be as, again, highly revenue generating. Some of these can be like customer service based, where it's, again, proactively sending a message if shipping or fulfillment gets delayed. So somebody knows that you're on it, and just trying to be a little bit more proactive in that regard. So getting on your toes as opposed to being on your heels, but it really kind of can help some of those customer service issues and addressing some of those in an automated fashion. So again, lots of different components of it, but basically kind of giving you a few different angles to look at it from. So how do email automations increase revenue? Like basically back to our original question, basically thinking about these and how they basically work to raise the bar for your revenue at each different stage. So let's go through this example. I kind of like this kind of way of viewing it, because it helps me kind of visually understand, hey, this is how much we're actually going to be driving, and how do we kind of understand how much we can kind of capture each time. really gives us a little bit more insights into, hey, if we're introducing new automations or if we're optimizing our existing automations, we can gradually improve the baseline level of revenue they're driving. So basically, if we're starting at a baseline of XYZ revenue for our e-commerce store, saying or baseline level of automations. We have XYZ revenue coming from those. If we were to introduce new automations on a consistent basis, we can introduce, like, say, hey, if we can raise that baseline, like, say this is like $10,000 a month. If we can raise that an extra $3,000 a month, like, that is fantastic, because hey, if this new automation drives $3,000 additional dollars to our $10,000 a month, that $13,000 a month is again better than 10 over the course of the year. That's like 36,000. So again, we're looking good. Basically, if we're able to introduce another one the next month, adding an extra $2,000, we're suddenly up to $15,000 a month. So that 15, again, the extra $3,000 a month suddenly again adds a little bit more. So we're at $60,000 more during the year. And as we gradually introduce these, it gives us opportunity to kind of raise that level each time. So we're raising that baseline each time. We can gradually improve, tweak, and introduce new automations. But as we're raising this baseline level of revenue, it's going to work for us in the background because we're not necessarily always touching this. It's something that really does operate for us in the background, and we don't have to always think about it. I always think about it as kind of like investing in your 401k. Again, it starts off a little bit slower, granted, but it's something that compounds over time, and you really thank yourself because you're not constantly, like, again, trying to pick stocks. It's a little bit easier, a little bit more manageable, where again, you're building this so it's going to be working for you in the background and not necessarily taking a lot of heavy lifting to manage. So if you can automate this, it makes it really simple. And gradually over time, you can introduce more and more automations, which are going to function at different levels of that customer journey to drive the behaviors you want to see. I always, again, kind of think of those as kind of like good dog, bad dog rewards. Like, good dog, here's a treat. Or like, bad dog, don't do this. And kind of like getting them to where you want to go, or directing that or orchestrating that behavior really helps. But when we're introducing these, we're working on these on a pretty methodical, consistent basis. And if we can introduce a new automation every single month, this gives us opportunity and runway to, again, improve that customer experience, but also drive incremental revenue with each of those additional new automations. So typically what we do with our clients is we're introducing a new automation every month, or we're polishing and optimizing one existing automation. So again, depending on, like, we may be introducing 2 automations, we may be polishing 2 automations, depending on how aggressive that group wants to be. We use these as a way of, like, improving over time and going through a methodical process of introduction, iteration, and improvement. And when we can do that, it gives us ways to, again, raise that baseline level to a place that it's really, really strong. And it gives us ways to experiment and test and explore what we can do. And so we can understand, hey, what that customer behavior is, who are our most profitable customers, what are those segments needing, how do we potentially drive more revenue out of those specific segments, and how do we kind of do this in a little bit more strategic way where we're not kind of like letting our best customers, again, kind of move up our audience hierarchy by happenstance. And if you're interested in audience hierarchies, we have a pretty good blog post about that. So we can link to that here. And then basically, if you're moving them up that audience hierarchy, this is how you're getting intentional about it and automating the process of doing that. So you don't have to always do it in the background. And basically, because it is triggered based on behavior, it's super contextual, super impactful, and it works well. So from there, how much should your automations typically make? So thinking about how much revenue these want to drive. If I'm thinking about like a typical e-commerce store, depending on the business model, we typically want to see like 10 to 20% of e-commerce revenue coming from those automations. I know that may sound crazy and high initially, but hey, if we're thinking about this, we should be at least driving a strong portion of our revenue through these. This is based on behavior. This is really where we know, hey, it's certain time horizons, we're going to be able to, again, communicate and message effectively enough that somebody's going to either like, oh, I purchased my first time. Oh, this complementary product would be so perfect for that. I'll make it a second order. We want to kind of like ideally walk them through the best customer experience possible and give them anything they would need at each of those stages so they have the information they need to make those decisions. If we can do that well, we can start to drive revenue from this really strong in a really meaningful way. And over time, we're able to understand, hey, if this is my best customer segment, or if this segment is growing, how do I again incorporate that into my again baseline of automations where we can gradually improve and iterate over time. Um, Also, depending on use case, like the segmentation around use case here is always really powerful based on like giving recommendations based on one specific buyer segments. It's really great in a way of like getting those automations really segmented based on their again what they need or how they're going to behave. And then depending on the business model too, like you may have replenishable products that are really easy that again need to be replaced every 3 to 6 months. And those are really simple because hey, like we need to communicate. This is typically what that replenishment cycle looks like. Did you know that? And hey, we're gonna give you updates along the way just to make sure that you're aware of it. But it's a really effective way of doing that and just like nudging that customer where we need to go. So how do we track the revenue of these? So when we think about this, at the end of the day, like when we're tracking for our clients or thinking about this, we're always trying to think like in 3 layers of like, hey, what are our kind of engagement-based metrics or like metrics that we're looking for at a specific email level that are going to help us understand if we're winning or losing? What are our performance-based metrics? What at like the overall like email strategy level? Is going to help us understand, hey, is this really moving the needle forward the way we want it to? And then what at the organizational level is helping us understand, like, what is the North Star we're shooting for? So typically we're looking at this from the lens of like, hey, how well are we driving number of repeat customers or revenue from repeat customers? And from that, we can kind of extrapolate, hey, number of repeat revenue from repeat customers is directly correlated to our revenue from automations and revenue from campaigns. So the two of those are going to be really, really important numbers that we're looking at all the time. So when we're doing reporting every month, like, yeah, we're reporting on like our main goal is like revenue from campaigns, revenue from automations. And it really gives us a way of like, hey, like at the end of the day, like this is not like warm fuzzy in any ways. Like we're tying this directly back to revenue. This is what we need to focus on. At that bottom layer where we talked about the engagement-based metrics, that's where we can talk about open rate. That's where we're thinking about, again, click rate. But again, those are going to contribute to that revenue from automations and revenue from automations and revenue from campaigns. So it really kind of helps us ladder those up to ideally an organizational level goal. So it's not just like a marketing level goal, it's suddenly a organizational level goal. And it gives really great clarity as to how this work's actually impacting the bottom line of the business at a high enough level where it's not going to take somebody who has a lot of expertise in email to understand it, but also really kind of be able to connect the dots of like what the outcomes of this work is, which is really nice. Again, we typically track those on a monthly basis. And then like with a lot of those, again, when that work is going on a consistent basis, we'll track the monthly revenue from each of those individual flows or automation. So we make sure that like they're performing at a consistently high level. Well, if we need to tweak something and adjust something, improve it, we're doing that. And we can basically make sure like one doesn't just fall off the cliff at any given time. So we make sure that our systems are working, our automations are working, they're firing properly, and over time we want to be testing in those all the time so we know what's working, what's not, and we can improve and iterate. So basically, this is kind of where this also gets kind of fun is like, hey, there's so many different things we can do. Like if anybody looks into Klaviyo, like you look at the flow library, you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much to do. Where do I even start? Okay, we have a process we typically go through that we really like to kind of prioritize these. So basically, how do we think about these from the perspective of, hey, how much revenue is it going to drive? How many different systems are going to be involved in this, so how much control we have, and then how much effort it's going to take. So we basically give this a score and think about this as like, how do we score the most valuable automations? Because yeah, those are the ones we want to do first. So the ones that are going to be driving the most revenue, going to be the most control over, and also going to take the least amount of effort are probably going to be the ones we want to start with. So like let's start to prioritize these where we give these an actual score. So we're not just kind of saying like, yeah, I think this is going to work, I think this is going to work. We can really fully understand this and say, hey, how do we kind of like plan for which of these we're going to introduce at what times, because we can really start to like, again, kind of reverse engineer which are going to make the biggest business impact for us. And as we're improving and introducing new ones, we know this is kind of a process that is a little bit more rigorous than just like, hey, let's try this one this month, and just shooting from the hip. Nobody likes shooting from the hip. It doesn't really work. So we don't like to do it. So this is kind of the process we go through, and basically we give those at again a 3 out of 9 score, and like again the eights, those are the ones we want to do first. Like rarely does 9 happen, rarely does 3 happen, but based on how much impact those are going to make, those are how we typically work to introduce them over time. So this is a process we like to go through, and again, we've gone through this with like any given month, like have some clients having like up to 20 revenue generating flows, and again, those didn't happen overnight. So this was a process of introducing these over time. Basically, from there, thinking about like, hey, what should our top revenue driving automations be, or like what are our most profitable flows? So thinking about those again and where they fit into the business, knowing, hey, your welcome should be driving a solid amount of revenue for you, and understanding like, hey, how do we take a customer who's interested and turn them into a converting customer? So we want to walk them through that onboarding process, introduce them to the brand, introduce them to the product category, help them make a decision, help them feel confident making a decision. And that's kind of what we're looking at doing in that welcome. So the welcome, hey, this is what we talk about in our foundational automations. Like, welcome needs to be one of them. The second one, typically your abandoned cart. Again, abandoned checkout technically, but they basically, if somebody starts the checkout process, this is where you're following up with them. There's technically an abandoned cart that's kind of in between that, again, abandoned checkout and browse abandon, but that's if an existing customer or somebody we have existing data on adds somebody to their cart, we can follow up with them. We typically like to do the abandoned checkout first because that one's just, again, a little bit more profitable and a little bit faster to revenue in that process. And again, it works well. And again, we're segmenting both the welcome sequence and the abandoned cart very highly. And again, making sure that, again, those are going to send a lot. So let's make sure they're really optimized. A browse abandonment, that follow-up is really, again, typically a really profitable area too. So we can follow up typically if we have that information on that customer, we can follow up with them and making sure that they have everything they need to make a decision. And then maybe even a few other times to, again, like drive them through that customer journey a little bit faster. The thank you and or like slash post purchase, we always kind of like think about these in the same vein. Again, the post purchase we can gradually improve and iterate on over time too. This is an area where it's basically like, how well are they going to actually use the product, and basically kind of like following up with them after they purchase to kind of like say thank you. A lot of the smaller brands that are kind of like founder-led brands, I think, are some of the more powerful groups here, because you can suddenly, again, kind of automate a message from the founder of the business, talking about like how they started it, how it's grown, and like why they serve that customer base. But it's really a kind of a powerful way to like position the brand afterwards. So those are typically the 4 we look at, like some of the initial foundational automations we look at. Those all fall at different stages of that customer journey. Like in addition to that one, we typically introduce a win back just for those lapsed customers. It's kind of an easy way to drive some revenue and pull them back in after they've lapsed. But those are kind of the 4 that are going to typically drive some of the most revenue for the stores we're looking at. So again, lots of different kind of like nuts and bolts of this, but basically this is how we look at email automations generating revenue, and kind of how we can kind of mentally think about this is like, hey, how do we raise our baseline all the time? And as we're gradually raising that base, that's going to work and compound for us over time, where we're suddenly, if we get that extra, again, if we're adding that extra $10,000, so that's $120,000 a year. And like, if we can get there, like that's great. And like, again, this is not just $120,000 a year. This scales up with your business. So for any given store, that could be, I mean, millions and millions and millions of dollars for those additional automations that could drive revenue. So it really helps us to kind of clarify what's working, what's not. And then this doesn't end in a year. This is perpetually working. And the best part about this is, like, if we know something's working through our campaigns, we can automate it. We can add it to these where we're going to actually hopefully use that to, again, drive consistent revenue without just like using it once. So again, to kind of wrap this up in kind of a pretty bow, automations may not seem like the sexiest area of like email or your marketing in general to focus on, but it's really a great tool for building a system, and a powerful system in raising the baseline revenue of your business and really kind of like creating the behaviors you want to see from your customer base and doing that in a way that's automated completely based on contextual information of what they do and what they don't do. It's also really great because it offers predictable recurring revenue. It basically that scales up with your business, which is really powerful in being able to understand like, hey, what can we expect if we had this? So this really is something that we're really, again, excited about. We get nerdy about it. Obviously, we're going this long on it. It's obviously something we're passionate about. So if you have any questions, reach out. We always love talking shop on this. Also, if we missed anything, let us know. Give us a comment, give us some review, give us some feedback. We always love hearing from you guys. And again, let us know if you have any questions. This was a blast, and yeah, hope you all have a wonderful day, and we'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.